Heard endurance.
Yeah, hi, Shamaka.
Oh, hi, Hugo.
Hi,
You're
pleasure to
welcome.
meet you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. So we'll take off immediately. I had a bit of a technical glitch.
No worries.
Yes, thank you. So good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this 21st session of the NBA-SBL Business Law Weekly. So today, our topic is exploring esports, an opportunity for lawyers. And my guest is already here. Ugo Obi is the founder and CEO of Malio Games, which is one of the top tier game development studios in Africa. Hugo, you're very welcome. You're muted. Hugo, you're muted.
Yes, no, thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
You're very welcome. So at some point in this conversation, we're going to be having Samuel as well. Samuel is a lawyer and he's the head of research and legal at Malio Games as well. So Hugo, over to you now. So that just a brief introduction for the attendees to meet you properly.
Yeah, no, thank you very much again. So it's a pleasure to be here. My name is Hugo Obi. I run a studio called Malio Games. We're based in Lagos, Nigeria. We make mobile games. So we make games for mobile specifically. We're very passionate about making games that tell African stories. So we make African-inspired games to share with both an African and global audience. Just to give some bit of context and background, the games industry is a $200 billion a year industry that cuts across, obviously, console, which I think is what a lot of people are very familiar with, but as well as mobile and PC. Mobile piece of it is actually the biggest piece. I think mobile represents 54% of revenue for the games industry. We have been making games since 2012. One of the reasons why we went into the games industry, and I went into the games industry, is because I realized that it's a really big opportunity to create meaningful jobs for, like our young, passionate, our youth, our talented youth, and as well as, contribute to the economic development of the country. Before we stepped into the game development space, there wasn't a lot of actors within the space. That hasn't really changed to date, but we're seeing some rapid growth in terms of number of people who have an interest in developing games and are learning how to develop games.
Okay, thank you very much. So basically, we're going to be talking about exploring esports, but we'll dial back a bit just to get in context. So you tell us a bit about the video games industry, which you already started, and then relate it to esports.
So I'll be very honest. I'm massively biased towards game development over esports. So the rationale and the reason for that is very simple. Like game production, game development is where the IP sits, right? That is creating content that has global IP. That's where the IP opportunity is. That's where the commercial opportunity lies. Pretty much 100% of the commercial opportunity lies in the creation of unique IPs. Esports, on the contrary, is more on the consumption side. It's more on the entertainment side. So there isn't much IP that sits within esports. I said that there's no IP that sits within esports. So esports leverages existing IPs to create experiences for audiences. maybe another way to explain this is if you think about music, game development are the music artists, esports are the event promoters. And we all know where the IP sits when it comes to creating music. So, I think that there is a huge opportunity. Obviously, creating games is highly technical. It's also very expensive. But, as a country and as a continent, we need to invest heavily in the production of original IPs that can be distributed worldwide, as opposed to continuing to do what we've done previously in the game space, which is being net consumers of content that is created elsewhere.
Okay, thank you very much. At least everyone on this call kind of gets, the difference between and where esports is on that. So a bit from the African Games Industry Report, because I looked at that and it was a very comprehensive piece. So if you can just through that, just briefly, just to get everyone to understand, what has been happening prior to now, because from my research, I find that the games industry has dated back like to the 60s or 70s.
Yeah.
A while back, yeah. So I don't, when it came to Africa, how much it has grown, where it is now, the future that you project, yeah.
Sure. So we put together the Africa Games, the first comprehensive Africa Games industry report in 2023. The reason why we put that together is because I think there's a lot of interest. People have a lot of interest in the games industry, but very limited understanding. Because the industry in itself is very nascent, there's not a lot of access for most countries. There are a few countries where we have, like I would say, like a decent amount of activity. So you're looking at places like South Africa, which is way more developed. They've been making games for a very long time. You have places like Nairobi, Kenya, which is also growing. That's another big hub for game development. Accra is another big hub for game development. Yaoundé in Cameroon is another big hub for development, as well as Dakar in Senegal. The North Africans as well have a much more evolved gaming industry, partly because of the investment by Ubisoft a couple of years ago to build a studio in Tunis. It's actually, in Morocco, I think it was in Marrakesh. But at the moment, Nigeria is still lagging behind, and that is partly because of the lack of access to talent, but also limited understanding of what the commercial opportunities for games are. So we took the responsibility of putting together the first industry report to try and articulate what the business commercial opportunities are and where the industry is globally. And then, paint kind of like a very simple picture of where we are today and sort of like where we're headed. So from a commercial standpoint, there are some ways that you can generate revenue from games. And I want to speak to that a little bit just to kind of like, again, educate your audience who are thinking, I play games, so I see people who play games, but I don't know how the people that make games generate money. So first of all, like I said already, it's an IP, right? So by it being an IP, it means that we are the ones who have the exclusive rights to monetize that asset. Second is that it's a global IP. So from a distribution standpoint, I can launch, we just launched a game with Disney yesterday called Disney Waju Rising Ship. That game is available for download around the world. So anybody, anywhere in pretty much geography around the world who has a mobile phone, Android or iOS, can download and play that game. So in terms of reach, it's very similar to music with what you have with like music streaming as an instance. And then from a monetization standpoint, like you can license your game to a third party. So you can develop a game that you can then package and license it to a third party. Again, no dissimilar from how music is licensed to third parties. You can also self-monetize. So you can monetize through ads as an example. So the more, very similar to what people do with YouTube content. So if you publish your content on YouTube, every single time people watch, they see ads. The more ads they see, the more revenue you make. Obviously, if it's a very popular content, then you can generate revenue from that. But the difference is that we also have something called in-app purchases. So this is more of virtual products within the games that people can actually pay for. And a lot of times that's where the real money is, because there is an unlimited amount of virtual items that you can include within a game. A highly successful game can do, like $100 million a year, easy. Some of the most successful games are doing over $1 billion a year in revenues from virtual items. So these are like in-app purchases. So if you think about, like the most sophisticated games, Call of Duty, League of Legends, with an endless list of customizations that you can do. Each of those customizations requires tokens, coins, and you can obviously buy those to accelerate your progress through the game. And because it's a worldwide audience, if you are able to reach the right demographic, then you can really be making a lot of money. The last way that games monetize, and this might not be the last, it's not a limited number, but the last major ways that games make money is through subscriptions. So you can subscribe, premium install. So essentially you pay to download the game. So, like, again, for those of you who play on PlayStation or on Xbox, you're probably familiar with this idea of like paying, like £60 or $60 or 60 euros to download a game. And, like the price would vary based on title. So you can download the game for as little as like, I don't know, $4, or you can download them for as high as $120, right? And that is a premium. So you download the game, now the game is yours. The publisher of the game or the developer of the game, someone like us, will generate revenue for every single time somebody pays to download the game. So that's kind of like the basic economics of how you generate revenue from the games. So the industry report just highlights the different activities within the games industry in Africa, speaks to some of the trends that we're seeing. And then we also did, as part of that report, we did one of the widest industry surveys that really talked about the size of studios, the years of experience, the types of revenues that the studios are generating. And it's still early days for us. I think like a lot of those numbers are going to grow in the year coming. But at least it gives us a really, really good snapshot. And I will drop a link to in the comment section so that anybody who wants to download the report can go and download it. It's a free report. I think it's about 54 pages, if not more. That really gives 72. Thank you very much. Yeah. 72. Yeah, and that gives a really good snapshot of what's happening in the industry. And now that was really great work from Sam and the rest of the team who worked really diligently in putting that report together. It was also a Pan-African effort, so it wasn't just us. We worked with teams in Nairobi and in Johannesburg to put that report together to ensure that it was comprehensive and reflective of the landscape of the African games industry.
Okay, so before I move to the next question, I think I need to say that those that have questions, you can put them in the chat box, and then we'll take it at the end of the session. Also, if you're following the session, you can just give us like thumbs up so we know that we're carrying everyone along. So the next thing is, I heard you mention something about talent when you were talking about Nigeria. Is there a scarcity of talents, or what did you mean exactly by that?
There isn't a scarcity of talent. I mean, like anybody who lives in Nigeria know that we have really young and talented people. I think it's more refinement of talent. Like our universities produce, like hundreds of thousands of graduates every single year. But we all recognize the fact that, most of them are not ready to go straight into the workspace. So how do we refine and how do we prepare talent for production? So this is, again, something that we recognize as a problem. We recognize it as a hindrance for the growth of the industry. And as far back as 2021, we invested heavily partnering with Google to develop the largest training program for game developers on the continent. That program today graduates at least 120 graduates every single year who have at least the basic understanding of how to make games. And then the idea is that this talent will then hopefully start to drive the new wave of games that come to market. And that is something that has to be sustained. So you can't achieve long-term success by just running a tiny, like a short-term training program. We also need to find, give them work experience, provide them opportunity to work with experienced teams, like at Malia Games. So we offer internships for some of the people that come out from that training program to be able to give them real world experience, and then they also would need to work on really high quality projects. So that's something that is continuous. We work with studios across the continent to ensure that we find, we try our best to obviously find placements for the graduates that come through the program. And we do community events post-program to ensure that people are constantly engaged with the trends and opportunities within the industry.
Okay, so that's very good, because I know that Nigeria is a place that is very robust. We have a very young population, so when I heard that the scarcity of talent, I was kind of, yeah.
Well, scarcity of market ready talent, I think, is what I meant to say. Scarcity of market ready talents. But I think again that is an investment that we need to make in refining talent. I think that the ramp up time, the time for ramp up is quite short because people are quite eager, they're quite passionate, they're quite keen to learn the skills. So it doesn't take as much time to ramp them up, but somebody needs to make that investment on that talent development.
So what do you say to it? Is it kind of like an investment that needs to be made through tertiary institutions, or it doesn't even need to go tertiary? What do you think?
No, I think like when you think about market ready talents, the best person to build market ready talents is the market itself. So the market
Yeah.
understands the needs that it has. It has a vision for what is happening in the long term. It is possible that the market, so businesses like us, can partner with tertiary institutions to design programs specific to our needs and the needs of our industry, and work side by side with the tertiary institutions to evolve those content. And we've seen that happen as a university, where one of the local game studios, Letty Arts, works with the university to create curriculums for students at the computer science department. So it is possible that that is also one way of achieving this. But like building a talent pipeline for long-term success is something that every business needs to do, not just in tech.
Okay. So based off of what you've just said, what do you think is the role of government or even policymakers in helping develop the industry?
Yeah, so that's a really good question, and it's a tough one, I think. Like government has multiple challenges, and we are also, like living in a very difficult economic time.
Yeah.
Obviously, I think that one of the primary roles of the government is to enable, like to kind of like understand the needs of the industry and the market, and like through that understanding, and that is built around dialogue, put together the right policy framework to support the growth of an industry like this. So again, if that means like talent development, right? If that means tax incentives, if that means like building building the right incentives to attract foreign players to invest in the local market, to then upskill the local talent. It's all about acceleration, and obviously like making sure that like talking to investors and showing them other sectors of the economy where they can invest in, repurposing funds, so that like they can build long-term growth and sustainability and competitiveness, because like the world that we live in is quite competitive and we can't always lag behind. We should try and lead in some spaces. We've seen how successful the movie and the music industry is coming out of Nigeria. What are we doing to ensure that we also lead the way in the games industry? How are we making sure that happens? And it's not accidental. It's not just like one or two companies or enterprise individuals who drive that. How can government ensure that they are part and parcel of that success, so that they can also reap the reward when the success does happen? But I think government has a really important role. I know that we work very closely with the Federal Ministry of Arts, Culture, and the Creative Economy, through the Honorable Minister Hannah Tumisawa. She's a keen supporter of the games industry, and is a big advocate for the games industry. But I know that the ministry is quite young and they have huge amount of responsibilities. And we're hoping, I'm quite hopeful that in time, they would have the policies that can help enable the growth of the games industry here in Nigeria.
That's very interesting to hear that she's a very keen interest. But yeah. So based off of what you said now, are there any low-hanging fruits? Like, are there anything that you think that, oh, this one is good to go? It's just for us to do 1, 2, 3, and then are there any low-hanging fruit from your perspective?
Yes, I think there are massive low-hanging fruits actually. So I think that like somehow, whether by like by magic or by intention, we have built two of the most successful media industries in the continent. Like people come here to learn from us. People come here, people do research on us. People copy us for those. So there is
Yeah.
knowledge that already sits. How did we do it? Right? What were the ingredients that made this possible? And then how, and even if you look at fintech, the same thing in the tech space, like we have built, so I think like, I can't remember what the number is, but quite a decent portion of the unicorns that have come out from tech are Nigerian startups. So we do have what it takes. Like how can we leverage that knowledge and apply it elsewhere? Like how can we be a lot more intentional about building the next hub for game development, for mixed reality, for ed tech? How can we be a lot more intentional about that? Do we have an institution whose job is just purely to understand how these things are done, document them, prepare them, and then plan for the next one? So that, again, it's not just random enterprising individuals who magically make this happen, but it's a collective, intentional effort. I don't know if this already exists. Maybe I'm speaking to something that is already in place. But I'm hoping that this is something that we should, if we don't already have that, we should invest in that. And again, it could also be just private enterprise making this investment. It doesn't have to be government. So this could be private enterprise to ensure that, because like I remember speaking to a funding agency a couple of years ago, and we were talking about sort of like their funding strategies and the things that they want to invest in. And they were looking at, a lot of sort of like handyman work, like, like smaller scale handiwork type investments. And, I said to them, if you look 5 years down the line, like what are the structures of these businesses going to look like? They will still remain one-man, two-man businesses, right? The scope is not going to change. But if you invest in tech, if you invest in developing tech talents, right, you could have, like 2 or 3 companies that generate over, $100 million in revenue per year, employing over 1,000 people easily, right? And like the people that work in those companies that can then go on and do even more. So there has to be, an understanding of, how do we navigate our economic climate? How do we expand the scope of our economy? How do we support those who are already doing something unique and different? And how we're ensuring that we're putting enough resource to, build the next, oil industry. Yeah.
Yeah, so you've mentioned Nollywood and music industry a few times, and both industries were built by private, through private efforts mainly, even pushing the government, to come and support and things like that, but that hasn't happened as much. So in the games industry now, like how many studios are there and how much work is on ground already, based off of, from the report as well, that these people are already putting the work, already doing talent development. I know there are already some games that are on the app stores from Nigeria as well. So
Yeah.
right now, like what is already on ground? What is there to work with? Like if an investor or somebody picks up the report, they've looked at it and they're like, okay, let's even see what is on ground, what is happening, and then move
Yeah.
it from point A to B. Yeah.
Yeah, no, good question. I mean, right now there are very few studios on ground. So I would think that in Nigeria, for instance, we have maybe 40 game studios. I think something like at least like 85% of those employ less than 5 people. So it's still very, very, very nascent. But I think, like a lot of the guys who go into the game space come at it from a passion standpoint. It's a passion project rather than a business. And this is where business coaching and business training is very valuable. So, like especially for the people in the law space, you guys help companies get set up, you guys help build structures. If you offered like one of those like boot camps or workshops or training
Yes.
for like, like setting up, like if you're working creative tech or the creative space, like we can teach you the structures that you need, the basic structures that you need to be able to run a business, how to put together a business plan, how to put together pitch documents, how to do company registration. You could even, I don't know if this is possible, but you could even offer pro bono services to help people set up companies. Because a lot of times, people are avoiding the complexity, right? Like the creative process or the process for creating a game is so mentally challenging in a very different way to like drafting a contract or negotiating terms for an agreement. And a lot of people get sucked up or siloed out in that creative journey and then forget that like this is meant to be a business, and
Yeah.
businesses have structure and they have to be able to interact and need a bank account. And it's just, like time management, like spend 80% of your time building your game and thinking about your game, but spend 20% making sure you have a company registered, a business account, some, a business plan in place. Because yes, if somebody came to you right now and was really excited about your business and said, "Oh, can I see your business plan?" Guess what? You've never actually invested time thinking about it. And that, like we can't come and eat from where we did not sow, right? And we can't wait till the games industry is now as big as the music industry before we now all show up and say, oh, yes, 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 please let us help you guys with your deals. These are the things that we can do, right? Be there from the start, right? Be there when nobody else was there. Be the one who's championing and saying, we can offer this, we can offer that. Like, come, you know, if you don't have any money, we can at least give you these basic services at no fee whatsoever, right? Yes, maybe, again, like the VC model, maybe, like out of the 20 people that you meet, maybe it's only one person that ends up doing something. But at least there's that long-term commitment. There's that understanding of this could be the next big thing. And guess what? By the time you do have somebody who has something substantial, they would be in a hurry to come to you because they've seen that you have been actively supporting the space, right? And they say there is the trust, we know who you are. I mean, this guy who's spending all of his time thinking about games and creative, when you start speaking contracts, he has no clue. No, nothing prepared him for this. Nobody, nothing in his journey has prepared him to even think about terms of an agreement, reading through, like, I don't know, like 100-page document, having lawyers represent him, right? So I think like that is also really, really essential to help build it up. I think that, we would see more people actively setting up game studios. We would see much bigger teams, and we'll start to see much better revenue. But it has to be a holistic effort. It has to be a combined effort to force this to happen. Like Malio is already quite advanced in terms of where we are as a company. But I see a lot of other people who are coming through. And again, this is where the private sector plays a role. We know that the government can't do everything, and the government is never the most, like even in the best of times, isn't the most efficient way of getting things done. The private sector can step in to provide a buffer and provide, like that knowledge transfer that we've done commercial deals in the music space. We have so much knowledge from that. We have done commercial deals for Netflix. We have so much knowledge from that. We've seen this play out before. We know. Let's guide you guys so you don't make the same mistake that those guys made.
Okay. So thank you very much for that answer. You just pulled out the next question right from my mouth, which is the role of lawyers and the opportunity for lawyers in that industry. I think Samuel is going to come on at some point to give us like
Yeah.
his but at least you can, from where you, yes.
Yeah, I hope Sam all joins. I don't even think Sam. I don't know that Sam is going to join. I know like we had well, hopefully he joins. I think hopefully he's on the call. But like Sam joined the team about I think summer last year. He's our first, like the first lawyer in the team, and the way that he thinks about, like what we do is very different from the way everybody else thinks about what we do. So you, like I said, you have all these creative people, you have this creative engineers, you have this artists, this, game system designers, and they all bury their head down and they're just chucking through their game and they don't think about anything else, right? And like a lawyer is thinking about, like IP protection, a lawyer is thinking about contracts, a lawyer is thinking about NDAs, right? A lawyer is thinking about structure, like employment contracts, like like making sure that the IP, like our IP is protected. Um, Doing business advisory, going to meetings, right? Going to partner meetings without getting lost in that kind of like web of creation, right? So I think like that separation is really important and it really helps. And we also work with a couple of law firms. So it's not just about having an in-house lawyer. We also work with a couple of law firms. But it helps because I have a business background. And it's not,
Yeah.
again, it's not always about, oh, I have this contract that I need to get signed today. So I must go and speak to like our law firm introduces us to people. They invite us. They make sure we come to events. They make sure that people know who we are, and that we also know who people are. And it's constantly like building these linkages because weirdly enough, I think lawyers are some of the most connected people in the world. Actually, way more connected than bankers, because every deal has to have a contract in place, and everybody needs a lawyer to be able to. And they know the terms of the deal, so like they know who's thinking what and who should position where. I don't know, right? Obviously, with everything being confidential. So lawyers have a really, really, really valuable role to play in this space. And like I said, if it's possible to provide, I know in a country like ours, like the idea of pro bono is scary because everybody has bills they need to pay. But like it's still that whole like I guess the 80-20 rule, right? Where like you have to think about the potential whale that might come out, and it's never about the person. I guess different people think about these strategies in different ways. It's never about the person that you're with at this moment in time. It's about what that person can lead you to. Because guess what? Spending a lot of time with some engineer, some game developer gives you so much knowledge about how the space works that when that big opportunity comes through, you already have a lot of knowledge. So you don't get to meet, one of the big studios in the continent. And this is the first time that you are actually having a conversation with a game developer studio, and you sound very naive, right? If you have been investing time and talking to teams and speaking to developers and understanding their pain and understanding their journey, when that big commercial opportunity comes on both sides, because you might be speaking to a US company looking to acquire an IP from a Nigerian company. You can be looking at an acquisition, like a big Chinese company or European company wants to move into market and is looking for someone to advise them. And because you've already started investing in, like building up from the get-go, you already have a wealth of knowledge. So people come to you. It's not always about the big names. It's about the people who have the experience. And when they speak to you, they know you have the experience, and you gain that from just connecting with people in the space.
That's very good. Okay, so let me get them to maybe get Samuel on. Endurance, please, if you can hear me, if you can get Samuel on. So we'll go to the next question while we wait for that. So please, for the questions, let's use the Q&A box, not the chat box. Sorry for the other time. So the next question I have is, what role do you think that AI will play in this? Because it seems like AI is fast forwarding emerging markets and their development stages. So what role do you think AI can play either to hasten our own growth or to transform the industry in
Yeah,
that
so
case?
so yeah, so I think different people look at AI in different ways, right? Um, I look at AI as like a virtual assistant. Like you can give a prompt and you can get really fast responses. I would imagine that there are people who have much more sophisticated use of AI. So we have these project teams, and each of the project teams work as an independent unit. And the project teams are comprised of two engineers. So two engineers working on a project, they have no art support, no design support, no narrative support. So in game development, it's typically engineers, artists, designers, audio, visual effects, typically, and then project managers to kind of like bring everything together, right? But with our sort of like rapid prototyping, we just work with two engineers. And what we ask them to do is to provide us like a basic playable mechanic, like a playable game based on as minimal as possible of content, right? When it comes to like non-code related content as they can. And what we started to see is a lot of those engineers are now using AI to develop art. So whilst they don't have art support in real time for their project, and they recognize that this is just about showcasing the possibility of this game idea, they are now leveraging AI to create custom art for their games. And in some cases, those AI arts are quite good and already start to form some kind of like visual direction for what they imagine their games to be, right? So you have intelligent use cases in that way, where people can again create prompts and generate stuff that they can use instantly in their game. But I still think that for you to build a world-class product, you still have to have human input. So what the AI does is it helps to harmonize the understanding of the team around the project faster. It enables people to communicate way more, to better articulate, better polish their points and get them across. So if I want somebody to create like I don't know, like a rucksack for a game, and I wanted it to be a certain color, I wanted it to have like a military style, but also be futuristic, like that's a lot of words. And sometimes you spend so much time explaining that to an artist, and then he does one variation and it's not, and he does another variation and it's not. So he goes through multiple variations, and that's just not efficient. And today I can go in and I can put an AI prompt and get as close to what I'm imagining in my mind as possible. And then I send it to him and I say, this is what I want, right? Can you recreate that for me, but to fit the art style of this particular game that we're working on? And that is kind of like what I think AI, one of the things that I think AI can do for us.
Okay, very interesting. So, as much as I know that you're tilting more towards games more than esports, I think I have to pull you back a little bit.
Sure,
So,
sure.
yeah. So let's talk a bit about esports and where we are in Nigeria now. I know that there's an esports federation. I know that there are some tournaments, but if you can also give us a bit of background and what is happening presently in that space.
So yeah, so esports is I think it's had a lot of like there's been a lot of interest in esports. They, like you said, they have a federation in place, they have a federation president. They seem to have like a formal setting and a formal setup for what they do. They organize tournaments and events. Like people who play games and enjoy competitive games would always enjoy esports, right? Esports is about competitive gaming. Um, and the audience for that is really wide, right? There's also the possibility for people to win money, and that provides a really strong incentive for people to want to engage in these tournaments. Um, yeah, I don't know. I'm not an expert in esports, so I can't speak heavily about it. And I think that, yeah, those are the points that I have for now. Maybe if you have any other question, I can see if I can answer those.
Okay, so is there any correlation, do you know, with the development of the games industry in Nigeria and the competitiveness of the players in the esports? Do you think either of it affects each other? If we're growing well in the games, we'll do better in esports, or it doesn't matter?
So I think it will be great if there is a strong correlation between the two. So if our esports industry can inspire and drive the growth of our games industry, I think like that's a net benefit, and that would be great. I think that the challenge that we might face is that the games that are played in esports are high production games, like like huge budgets, high production quality, like real time support. So like now you're going into like kind of like the tens, fifties, and hundreds of millions in terms of production budget for those games.
Yeah.
So yeah, like those skill sets and that type of investment might be something that we don't necessarily have at this moment in time. But there might be opportunities to support the distribution and build awareness for the games through esports. So I do know that there are instances where during an esports event, for instance, local game developers have had like a stand where they can showcase their games. And that obviously provides a really good awareness for the games that are being made by the local developers. That said, I think that the types of games that people have the skill sets and the ability to make and the expectations, so you can imagine that the audience type is very different. So the expectations that those audiences have is very different. And that misalignment sometimes can also give the wrong type of feedback to the developers and for the games that they're trying to make.
Okay. Okay, I quite agree, but I'm looking at it from the point that maybe if the players, start like getting into the game, practicing from using the games that are made here, because I think to be a very good player at anything, you have to practice a lot
Yeah,
and practice with what you have, not with
yeah,
what you have. Yes. So that's
yeah.
kind of how.
Yes. So if we decided, let's say as a studio, let's say we decided to make a competitive game, right? Then yes, absolutely, we can leverage esports and bring in esports players, test out games, give us feedback, and
Yeah.
instantly use this feedback to improve the games. But what I think is that the development strength that even we have as a studio would not be sufficient to be able to make a competitive enough game for those passionate esports players.
Mm.
Um, and what it would take is a lot of time, a lot of investment, and a
Yeah.
commitment on both sides, right? Which is rare. So it is possible, and I think like that synergy might exist. So like let's say for instance, Malio as a studio can create an
Yeah.
esports team. So we can build our own esports team that goes out and plays other games, as well as helps us internally with the development of our game.
Yeah.
But we have never imagined building a competitive game yet. So that could be something, that could be a perfect synergy where esports can support game development, like to the T, if our vision was to build a competitive game. But we could also apply esports to even the non-competitive games that we have. So, we just launched Rising Chef, a cooking game. It's a
Mhm.
simulation time management game. If we let's say, brought together a few esports players to tell us how we can make this game competitive, their knowledge can add to the development or evolution of this core mechanic into something that is super. And through constant refinement, we can get it to the point where we can take it out to a local competition and people can play it and enjoy the same way they would enjoy any other esports game. So yes, you are right. It's possible, very possible.
Okay. Thank you. I like that you're having thoughts about it. Also, in your thoughts, you should think about there's one game that we used to play when we were in primary school. It's called Police and Thief. So maybe you should think of making a game like that. So I'm trying to
Yes.
get Samuel on. but let me see if
Sam is already here. I can see Sam. Sam is already here.
Samuel, are you on yet as a speaker?
Yes, I am. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much and welcome. Welcome. So I had asked Hugo earlier about the role of lawyers and the opportunities that there are in the industry. So if you can, just in a few words, because time is fast spent. So as much as you can, just to let the attendees follow the role of lawyers and the opportunities that there are in the industry. I don't know if you heard Hugo's answer, so that you kind of, don't repeat what he has already said.
Yes, I did. Thank you very much, Chiamaka. Good afternoon, everyone. It's a privilege to be here. Thank you so much, Hugo, for giving a bit of answer to that question. So, like you mentioned, I'm currently there's a program organized at Microsoft, so we're just trying to be part of that quickly. And I had to step out to just be part of the call because I remember that I promised to be here, right?
Yeah.
And yes, so one thing for me is first off, I think as a lawyer, you need to have a growth mindset. Um, I mean, naturally, we tend to read a lot of books, then we read a lot of articles. So on the research side, it wasn't really that difficult. Yeah, but one thing with the growth mindset is that it helps you with respect to any business you're going to. You're trying to understand what's it called now, the background knowledge. So I mean, coming into Malia, I remember the first conversation we had then was, him asking, what do you know about the games industry, right? So to be fair, I knew a bit, but not as much as I do right now. So one of the first things I had to do was to pretty much understand what the industry was about. And you can also tie this down to entertainment, right? Like someone once argued, just because you're vast in IP law doesn't make you a great entertainment lawyer because there are certain mechanisms that will still apply to that industry. So it's the same thing with the games industry and the esport industry. So you need to first off, right, understand the technical bit of what's happening in the industry. Yeah, and that sort of helps you build a business understanding. Well, an industry understanding that then kind of fine tunes your business understanding of the same industry. And yes, on the business development part too. So I know I currently lead legal and partnerships, and I also do a bit of research. And working on the report was a great deal, yeah, because again, it sort of like opened up sort of gave exposure really to the industry and the things that are really going on and what's happening, especially on the African front, because you tend to hear a lot, about electronic arts, Call of Duty. Everyone knows the big games, everyone knows the AAA games. But now I understand concept like indie games, I understand concept like AAA games, right? And all of that. So if I walk to a random person that they may not be able to tell that difference, but I can. Yeah. And then with respect to the scale or the size of your game studio, then you begin to have conversations around, what kind of license do you wanna leverage on? Yeah, what kind of marketing budget are you looking at all of those things? What kind of collaboration are you looking at and all of those things? So just to keep to time, right? I would say yes, open mindset, having a good skill with research, that's going to really help. Business development mindset will also help. Of course, you have your regular understanding with corporate governance. You have your understanding with IP. You have your understanding with contract. Principles of contract, and all of those things would definitely apply. I also think that beyond the contract and the regulatory compliance, lawyers would also play a great role in advocacy. So one of the things that we had to do at Mali is obviously do a lot of government, interaction and government relations. Yes. And that means that you have to be there, step up, be a part of that conversation, and try to basically discuss about policy engagement in this space. One of the interesting things that we did was sometime last year, prior to 3MTT, we were privileged to be there, right? I would just had conversations around the industry. So the typical example, like I always give, is the fact that one of the things that everyone in the industry was pushing for is having a sustainable law for video games, not just what you have with the gaming law, because there has to be that clear distinction, between video games, mobile video games, and your regular betting.
Betting. Yeah.
Yeah, but
Betting.
right now the laws are kind of fused. But in that conversation, it was hard, right? And then it was the Ministry of Culture and Technology coming together in that conversation. And yeah, they noted that because the lawyers that were on ground, the industry stakeholders, the game developers that were on ground were pretty much saying the same thing, that it has to be that distinction, and all of those. And also you need to have a fair understanding of pretty much M&As, because again, the games industry in Africa, Nigeria and Africa at large is not so big yet, right? And what you're seeing, you tend to see a lot of collaborations going on, and of course the industry is growing, so there would definitely be rooms for mergers and acquisitions in the future, right? And the skill of lawyers will be very, very important in that instance, because again, you need to be able to advise your clients on how to go about all of this. But it would also be great when you have that fundamental understanding of how the industry really works, right? As that will help you to better position your clients, right? Because you may say, oh, this is an indie studio, but I guarantee you there are some indie game studios that are making as much as 100 million USD, 20 million USD in a year,
Wow.
right? Even much more than the portfolio of some AAA studios, right? So just those are the dynamics you have to look at. So you won't say that, oh, my company is, you don't want to say that, oh, the game studio is small, or we don't have a lot of facilities or infrastructure. That doesn't mean that the worth of the studio is also small, right? Because like I said, the IP is great and it's distributed globally, and that pushes up the value as well. So understanding these dynamics also helps you, in terms of advising your clients in the money transactions in that regard. So yes, and also having, I think on the final note is also having interest in the industry you're going to, as that helps with the understanding of the creative process flow. So for example, one of the things we tend to do is we do something called knowledge sales, right? So yes, I'm a lawyer and I understand the IP, I'm trying to understand the mechanics, but the knowledge sales also kind of gives me a basic understanding of, what do I look out for in a game? What are the things that I note in a game that makes it really interesting, right? So it's just the same way if you're in courts, in the fintech space, you probably want to understand critically how payment works on the technology side, right? So if you're in the e-commerce space, the same thing, you want to understand, oh, how does the logistic work, right? On the logistic side, right? So the same thing with the games industry.
Thank you so much, Samuel. We have a lot of questions, and I'm trying to see if we can manage the time left. So I would want you to stay on. You can take the legal ones, then Ugo can take the other ones. So this first one, it says, what are the key legal frameworks and regulations governing esports in Nigeria, and how do they differ globally? Wow, I think this one will take some time. Sam, can you do a short answer, or should I?
I'll just be brief. I'll just be brief with this one.
Okay, please, you
So
can
the
do it really,
concept,
really
the
fast.
concept behind esports is largely around broadcasting, if we're being fair. So like what Hugo mentioned, right? Um, People are making the games, but esports is saying we'll play those games and then we'll broadcast it, right? So obviously regulations around broadcasting is going to play a big role. Regulations around IP will play a big role, because before you can use broadcast certain content, right? You need to understand who owns the content, right? So the questions around audio, visual, your copyright, comes in and all of that. You have your agreements sort in place, and all of that. So I mean, so for example, now you're a streamer, you're creative, you've bought a game, maybe FIFA, right? And you're streaming FIFA. Don't even mention FIFA. So let's just say in the nearest future, Malio makes a AAA game, right? And we call it Malio Boxing. Do you understand? So Malio Boxing, of course, belongs to Malio, right? But as an esport organizer, you just you buy the game and then you create content with the competition that is in there, right? And that content belongs to you, right? So when you're looking at the regulatory framework, it's just pretty much the frameworks around broadcasting. So you don't want to broadcast, if you want to broadcast the content of your esports to a national TV, the rules you have to abide. abide with and laws you have to abide with. And then, of course, the copyright laws, trademarks, and all of those things would also definitely apply. And your regular contract agreements would also definitely apply. I think the major thing is with respect to whatever parties are involved on the player side and on the game manufacturer side, right? The contracts should always be the governing factor, right? So if you agree to broadcast within Nigeria, that would be there. If you are lucky enough to get your content broadcasted on a global scale, well, just know that you'd also have to pay up what's it called, commissions or royalties that were put to you from those broadcasters.
Okay. So this second one, I think the answer can be found in what you've just said. It says, Sammy, are there specific legal skills required for upscaling to be able to provide legal services to the esports world? And how can one access these resources? So, like I said, some of the answers are already in the answer that you've just given. Most of our legal skills are transferable, and an understanding of the industry is very key from what you've said. Yeah, so I think I'll just take there are just a lot of them. So then this one says, how do intellectual property rights intersect with esports, and what are some key considerations for lawyers working with esports clients to protect their assets?
Oh, okay. Like Hugo mentioned, since everyone is biased towards esports in this conversation, but yeah, just very briefly on that part, right?
Yeah.
So like I mentioned, for esports, yeah, essentially just broadcasting, right? And so you definitely need to work around especially your copyright laws, very, very, very critical around those. Your agreement, you want to make sure that, so broadcasting of your content, the content you're broadcasting, the players that will be involved. So you might want to, have what's it called now? Some sort of restrictive rights, because when you look at esports, really, technically speaking or generally speaking, esports is essentially you. So I mean, for Nigeria, it's not even as big as we think it is, but you have game players that are operating under an entity like a company or a brand, right? And these brands go out there to compete in some sort of a league. So just as you're having your Premier League in quotes, or you're having your Roland Garros in quotes, right? And you're playing physically, the esport is you using the games to go into that competition, of course. So IP with respect to content that is being created, IP with respect to the brand name, right? The trade name, so for example, you get to know the players, right? And they tend to be popular. So for those that watch football, right? Players like David De Gea or Gareth Bale, these guys actually have like their own esport companies and entities, right? And they have players that are signed to them. So with respect to that, you also have a different set of contract along the image rights, merchandising rights for those brands, which still falls on that trademark and all of those. So to be fair, it is just basically a proper understanding of your contract laws, your IP laws around copyright trademark, right?
Yeah.
And because of course copyright deals with content that has been created, audiovisual literary, what's it called, broadcasting and all of those very airtight, right? And you still have image rights, merchandising, and all of those things are things that you need to have watertight. But I would say one major thing you also need to consider for esports is exclusivity with respect to jurisdiction of your broadcast. Yeah, because sometimes you necessarily don't want to limit your content to just Africa alone.
Yeah.
You might want to also scale it up, right? And just give access to other countries to be able to see your content. So you might want to enter into broadcasting deals with studios or with agencies that can give you that exposure beyond Africa. And of course, whatever you put in your contract, just tie it around there with respect to the royalties or the commissions that are coming. Because I'll just make this final point, right? Just as you're watching your regular movies or soap opera on TVs, and they tend to have breaks in between where there's an advert that comes in, right? the same thing sort of happened to with respect to esports. So whatever channel is broadcasting, they've received the license to broadcast it, right? So there has to be some trickle down flow with respect to royalties or commission to the original content creator or to the essentially to the original content creator that of the content that's been broadcasted for the esports.
Sure, Maka, I just want to add this other point, just to kind of like again give some additional context. The 2023 revenues for the esports industry was around $2 billion.
How much of that, you said globally, yeah? How much of Africa to, or Nigeria specifically?
Well, that wasn't the point I wanted to make. I wanted to make the point that the 2023 global revenue for games, for the video games, was 186 billion.
Billion. Wow. Okay.
So it's not even comparable. Like you can't even compare the two of them. So I think that, you know, like my point here is that we're looking at the wrong thing, right? We can either try and play in a $2 billion industry, or we can play in a $200 billion industry. I think that we should spend more of our time and energy playing the $200 billion industry, because there are a couple of things here. So one is obviously it's much larger. The two is that the skill set you develop from making games. I mean, playing games is great, but I don't know what technical skills you develop from playing games. But I know the vast range of technical skills that can be developed from making games and how that can move us forward.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that. So I think we can just take maybe 2 more questions, because our time is already fast spent. So someone says, Suleiman says, as a gamer myself, I would love to network with people within the gaming industry. Can you recommend a few people to connect with? So Suleiman hasn't said if he's on the developer side or he's a player. So I don't know, but I think you can go
for sure. Yeah, so I think there are a couple of ways that you can do that. So one of them is there's a big industry event that happens at the end of the year in Cape Town called the Africa Games Week. It's the largest gathering of the games industry on the continent. So like that's something that is on everybody's annual calendar. So if you have the opportunity, it's a great place to be, to meet people who make games and understand the business of making games. We also, Malia Games runs a monthly meetup that happens physically, both in Lagos and Nairobi simultaneously. And it's also broadcast virtually. So you can either participate in person or virtual. That happens on the 3rd Wednesday of every month. So the next one is on the 20th of March. So, you know, that's also a great way to network. You know, like it's really focused around learning, sharing, and networking. So it's a much lighter event. And if you can't go to any of the physical spaces where it happens, you can obviously participate online. And then obviously using the internet as well. There are like loads of like WhatsApp groups, you know, like Facebook groups where you can join and network with people within the continent who are making games.
Okay, thank you very much for that answer. So I think we'll take this one as the last one before we take final thoughts. So this one is from Adele Adejimo. He says, I'm interested in understanding the legal landscape for content creators and streamers in the growing field of esports. With the rise of streaming and content creation, what legal considerations should content creators and streamers be aware of? Additionally, how can lawyers play a role in assisting them? I think some of these have been previously answered. So did you want to add anything else? Did you hear the question, Ugo?
Yeah, I think this is more for Sam.
Okay, okay. Sam, please, did you want to?
Yeah,
I think most
I
of it
think most of
has
it,
been answered during the session. So do you want to add anything else?
I mean, I think what I'll just say is with respect to being there with them from the start, so you don't have to like wait till they go big. You can, you know, help them with respect to the business side of things, right? Managing, you know, reviewing NDAs with the esports they want to join or the esports company they want to join, you know, look through the content development agreements they are having with any of these esports company, because in all of these have their different ecosystems. And if you have any one of the ecosystem players coming to meet you, yeah, having a fundamental idea of the ecosystem really helps. So that's what I'm just going to add to it. So if you're really interested in the esport and just read more about what's happening in there, as that would help you with your conversations with your clients.
Thank you very much, Sam. So we'll just take a time is already fast. So you can go first, and we'll so just final thinking of games, different from playing the but for everyone that has come on, you want them to remember about this.
So did you want me to go first?
Go first and then you round up.
Sorry, who goes first?
Samuel.
Okay.
Oh, okay, thank you very much. Yeah, so final thoughts. It's the gaming industry is quite interesting, and I also a question if there's difference between gaming and esports. There is definitely a difference between gaming and esports, right? So I just think that it's time for everybody to just speak up on the business side of things with respect to this industry. And Africa is a new hotspot. You have a lot of conversations happening here, and it would be great if the lawyers are also part of the conversation, right? Because you're very integral to what's going on. And again, the games industry is pretty much it's a tech space as well, right? And even though yes, you have a lot of interest in fintech and every other areas of technology, we're looking at an industry that is a culmination of creativity and technology. So for people that really love the entertainment space, your games are going to have music, your games are going to have art, your games are going to have animation, your games are going to have drawings, right? And these are pivotal points where the lawyers are really needed, right, to be able to tie the strings together. Because you really can stop the collaboration development for technology, but what you can do is to shape the policy around it or the legal frameworks, around it, contribute to it, right? And yeah, lawyers too, we actually do need to play more games and just get ourselves more relaxed.
Okay, thank you very much, Samuel. So who go? Samuel.
No, I love the point. I love the point about lawyers playing more games and relaxing a little bit more. No, I think for me,
make more law games where lawyers are arguing and then we're checking what kind of argument goes to the next.
we can help you guys with a game like that. I think why not, right? We can make it fun.
Yeah.
So I think for me, the important thing here is we need to be very intentional about the decisions that we make around how we support the industry. I think that our motivation can't be just purely financial. So it can't be, how much revenue did you make last year? And then based on that, I decide on if I want to work with you or not, or what is your projected revenue for the next 3 years? It's like, how am I going to get, how am I going to be able to pay for my diesel or pay my staff salaries? That can't be the motivation. The motivation has to, for me, be very simple. How do we get a lot, what slice of the pie can we get? And what do we need to get that slice of the pie? And I think that the law firms need to leverage their network. So don't only look inwards, look externally, right? Speak to your partners in Europe and America, Asia, where this industry is already more developed, and ask them, what role do they play? How did they get the industry to where it is? What journey did they go through? What can we do here to achieve something similar, right? And then I think the last thing is try and meet with, when you meet with the developers, try and meet them where they are. Like I said, a lot of the guys in the game space are passionate. So they come at this with passion, right? And you can't dismiss passion, right? Because passion is how you make magic. And you can't describe how magic is made. So I think those are the thoughts that I have around what I think the lawyers can do, and this is a great first step. Obviously, even having the conversation is a great first step, and I hope that this is one of many conversations that we can have.
Yes, most definitely. So what I hear from you is more active than reactive roles. Lawyers should come on as partners, collaborators, in growing the industry. So that's really a great place to draw the curtain. Thank you everyone for joining this session. It's one of many. It's been hosted by the NBA-SBL under the leadership of Dr. Adeoye Adefulo. I haven't seen him on this call, but I'm sure that he will rewatch and send out his own thoughts. Also, it was hosted by the NBA-SBL Committee on Sports, Entertainment and Media under the chair of Beverly Agbakoba Onyejian, who is also very interested in esports and, the growth of industries. So thank you so much, Hugo, for your time. Thank you, Samuel, for your time. Thank you, everyone that has been here with us. We kind of had to rush through to cover a lot in an hour, but I think it was very insightful, very engaging. And, the questions that even came forward showed that people were following the conversation. So that's really very good. So I appreciate everyone that's been on this call. Thank you for spending your afternoon with us. Enjoy the rest of your day. Endurance, I think that's it from me. Thank you. Thank you, Samuel.